The first image that I saw was the image of happy, dancing, singing young Iranians, most of them age of my eldest children, brandishing colorful green, yellow, blue. Green was not still the dominant color. Claiming the street. This was the most important thing, claiming the public space. The public space that had been denied to them, that had been regulated, had been disciplined for them by a brutal police. They poured into the streets and claimed it. It was a festive occasion. It was an occasion like Bakhtinian Carnival. It was a carnivalesque occasion. On both sides, those who were campaigning for Mr. Mousavi and those who were campaigning for Ahmadinejad. So the first image is an image of a changing political culture, changing generation. 80% of Iranian population is under the age of 40, 70% under the age of 30, 50% under the age of 25. So for me, as someone who was born and raised in Iran, and then not having seen these kids born and raised, it was an extraordinary moment to see how a new generation has come, a new generation that has endured 30 years of a brutal theocracy, and yet had poured into the street finally and claimed the street. Of course, this was not an entirely spontaneous or sudden. There are grassroots movements, student movement, women's rights movement, labor movement in Iran, but this was the political manifestation of those deeply rooted and historically anchored social movements. So my initial reaction was one of euphoria and happiness, very comparable and in fact superior to what was happening in the United States during and in the immediate aftermath of the election of Obama. As it happened, I was invited just a couple of years ago to write the text for a massive photography exhibition of one of the greatest Iranian photographers, Bahman Jalali. There was a retrospective on him in Barcelona, in Antonio Tapies Museum. So I had an opportunity when I was writing that essay to go over the magnificent work of Bahman Jalali over a period of almost half a century. And as you know, Bahman Jalali was the photographer of both the Iranian Revolution and the Iran-Iraq War. That is between 77 and 79 when the revolution was taking place, and 1980 and 1988 when the war was happening. And what's extraordinary is that fortunately Bahman Jalali was still with us when the Green Movement started. But in a conversation, Bahman Jalali was asked why was he not out in the street taking picture, and he said that now the participants, the young generation itself, was taking a picture by these gadgets, by these mobile phones. So something has happened in the very architecture of our imagination, so far as photography is concerned, because the camera and the photographer are no longer taking a distance from the event in order to register it. The event is in fact being photographed by itself, as if the intermediary of the photographer has disappeared. This is something absolutely extraordinary. We have some photography from the Constitutional Revolution, and then the nationalization of Iranian oil that resulted in the CIA engineer coup of 1953. We have shots. We have both photography and video clips of those events. If you put them together, the development and evolution of photography as a mode of visual registration of social events has changed. And because of new media, I mean, this very media with which I'm talking is absolutely miraculous. I mean, in my lifetime, I remember when the Iranian Revolution of 77, 79 was happening, And when Khomeini went to Iran in February 79, I was a graduate student in Philadelphia. I had to go to a Radio Shack. It's a shop 30 miles away from Philadelphia to buy a shortwave radio in order to listen to Tehran radio to see what was happening in Tehran radio, all the parasites and such. But now I get up in the morning and I read the papers in Tehran before the Tehranis are actually up because of the time difference. So the evolution in the media is integral, especially photography, especially visual registers of social movements are integral. They're no longer in the neighborhood of social revolutions. They are integral to the social revolutions. They become the visual registers of material unfolding of events that gives us a whole different perspective on the issues. And it is not just a matter of giving us as observers different perspective, but the unfolding of the event itself is visually conscious of itself. That's the remarkable event. I think the democracy movement in Iran, what our children call the Green Movement in Iran, has reached the point of no return. Whatever the Islamic Republic, whatever the government does, it will make it more stronger. If it allows it to pour into the streets, they will see masses of millions of Iranians are no longer satisfied with this government. If they brutally suppress it, as they have, they will lose moral legitimacy. Islamic Republic ended between the June of 2009 and February of 2010, the period of successive social demonstrations that Iranians poured into the streets, and by simply asking one very, very simple question, where is my vote? Islamic Republic's brutal nature came out. Just like a porcupine, all its spikes came out. And a garrison state that it has always been was for the whole globe to see that Islamic Republic lacks the slightest legitimacy with its constituency and has to resort to arbitrary arrest, kidnapping, incarceration, torture, and even reports of rape. An Islamic Republic is accused of being rape. And globally, for the whole world to see that the moral authority of the Green Movement is because it's nonviolent. And the moral bankruptcy of the Islamic Republic is precisely because in its inability to give a simple answer to a simple question and resorts to violence. So, what we're witnessing today is the political implosion of Islamic Republic. Political implosion. That is, the Islamic Republic is imploding. If you consider the fact that Islamic Republic is contingent on the notion of Velayat al-Faqih, the authority of the jurisconsult, and yet the very theoretician of the idea of Velayat al-Faqih, Ayatollah Montazeri, died spending the last few months of his life questioning the validity of Islamic Republic, and in a very famous statement he said the Islamic Republic is neither Islamic nor a republic. So, and if you put together the oppositional figures from Ayatollah Montazeri to Mr. Musavi to Mr. Karoubi, and if you were to include Mr. Khatami and Mr. Hashemi Rafsanjani, you will see that these are the leading echelons of Islamic Republic. These are not opposition like Mujahideen, etc., from outside the country. These are internal to the state apparatus, prime ministers, speakers of the House, two-time presidents like Khatami and Hashemi Rafsanjani. So what we're witnessing is internal implosion. The other day, Mr. Tajzadeh, who was in charge of election during the reform movement, and he's in jail, he accused the leader of the most powerful component of the constitutional apparatus of the Islamic Republic of having cheated the residents of Tehran of 1/4 of their number of their votes in order to have a friend, an ally be elected to the parliament. So the internal implosion of the Islamic Republic continues to unfold, and the maturity of Iranian electorate, the maturity of Iranian population, the maturity of a political culture that does not resort to violence and is adamant for the transition to democracy to be nonviolent. Every time continues to be self-evident, and there is a global consensus. Iranians across political spectrum are in with this solidarity, and as a result, the most important and enduring and evident result and achievement of the Green Movement today, November 2010, is the persistence of a nonviolent civil rights movement that is very reminiscent of American civil rights movement. Ideals and aspirations and the visionary inspirations for this movement are people like Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King and so forth. And it is in that sense that, in fact, the fact that this movement has not yet come to success, has not come to fruition, is in fact good. Because this time around, Iranian people don't seem to be willing to repeat the violent and rash decision and conclusion of the Islamic Revolution of 1977-79, but in a much more paced and syncopated process are moving towards democracy.